Welcome, comrades, to Sheffield TUC's annual International Workers' Memorial Day event here in 2018. As you may know, this year we are celebrating 40 years of health and safety representatives in the workplace, brought in as a result of a Labour government's Health and Safety at Work Act. And I'm sure many of our speakers will want to pay testimony to the hard work of those health and safety representatives. However, the wider theme of this year's event is unionised workplaces are safer workplaces. And I also want to pay testament to all of the fantastic work the unions in this city are doing, both to serve their existing memberships, but also to reach out to unorganised workers. And I particularly want to wish the Bakers Union well in the next wave of strikes they'll be holding in McDonald's this coming May Day. Okay, I would now like to ask our Lord Mayor, Councillor Anne Murphy, to open the event by laying a wreath at the Workers' Memorial Tree.
Great to see so many people here today commemorating together International Workers' Memorial Day. You know, it's really important that we stand together, shoulder to shoulder, as workers in all of our various work situations and support each other and continue the fight for our rights at work, and particularly where health and safety is concerned. My family has suffered over the years from various ailments as a result of working. And they've had to fight, and the unions have fought on their behalf to get compensation for the injuries that they suffered. So thank you to the unions, thank you for today. It's great to see so many people here coming together and supporting the work that the health and safety reps are doing and what the unions are doing. So it's a real honour as the first citizen of Sheffield to be laying this wreath in memory of all of the workers who have passed away and also all of the workers who have sustained injuries in the workplace. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues, and today is the day when internationally we remember the dead and we fight for the living. The official figures say that 137 workers died in this country last year at work. Everyone, even the health and safety executive, accepts that that figure is probably closer to 1,500. 50,000 people died because of work-related incidents, illnesses last year that we know of. And of course these figures don't include the 71 people who died at Grenfell. And whilst that wasn't a works-related accident or death, we all know as trade unionists, without the inquiry even having to confirm this, that the reason those people died are the same reasons that we as trade unionists hear every day in the workplace, because somebody somewhere decided to cut corners, to cut costs, and to put profit before people. What we also know is that there will be many millions of people who will not be counted at all in these statistics. The 2 million people who are now in this country on 0-hour contracts or on precarious work, they will never see a health and safety inspector. If you're a migrant worker, you are unlikely to see a health and safety inspector. And that means it's up to us as trade unionists to police the workforce, to police industry, to make sure that people get the rights that they're entitled to. And I want to pay testament to the immense work that trade unionists do on health and safety. The reason why so many people suffer with mental health issues is directly related to the precarious nature of work these days. If you don't know where the next wage is coming from, you don't know where the next guaranteed working day is coming from, that leads to anxiety, that leads to mental health problems, and that leads to suicide in many cases, particularly with young men under the age of 24. And I want to pay testament to trade unionists, particularly young trade unionists, who have campaigned on the issue of mental health. The GMB's Young Members section has waged a massive campaign on mental health matters, and that's the unseen reality of health, safety, welfare these days in the 21st century. Yesterday, again, just to show how important it is for the trade union movement, our political representatives to work together. Yesterday, the Protect the Protectors Bill became an act. This is a piece of legislation driven by GMB activists and by Holly Lynch from Halifax Labour MP, which brings in additional protection for our ambulance crews and fire fighters, and aggravated sentencing when they're assaulted in the pursuit of their work, protecting us. That's why it's called Protect the Protectors. 14,000 ambulance workers assaulted during their working day over the past 4 years. 14,000. And at the last minute, the bill was expanded to include, as well as physical assaults, sexual harassment and sexual assaults. And that was directly linked to the work of one of our shop stewards, Sarah Kelly, from Yorkshire Ambulance Service, who herself 18 months ago was assaulted deliberately and by design by a man in the back of the ambulance who had deliberately incited a call out in order so he could be in the back of an ambulance with a woman paramedic and carry out a sexual assault. So that piece of legislation is a direct result of the work that trade unionists have done together with our Labour politicians. So colleagues, today marks International Workers' Memorial Day, and on behalf of the GMB, very proud indeed to commemorate with a wreath on behalf of the Yorkshire and North Derbyshire region of the GMB. Thank you very much for your attendance, and let's remember the dead and fight like hell for the living. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I would now like to welcome Paul Blomfield, Sheffield Central MP. Paul is a very long-time friend of the Labour movement and indeed of this Trades Council, and will be speaking today on behalf of all of the Sheffield Labour MPs. Paul.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of all of our colleagues who represent Sheffield in Parliament, and to thank the Trades Council, the Trades Union Council, for organising this event every year. It's one of dozens across the country organised by the TUC, and it is so important that we recognise that the battle around health and safety is not something that was won in the past, but something that we continue to fight today. I was meeting yesterday with a representative of people taking up the compensation claims for those struggling with asbestosis. And in so many different work environments, this remains a huge issue. And in a city like Sheffield, you know, we know from our past the challenging environments, the dangerous environments that people worked in were only changed because the trade union movement fought for change. Change around health and safety legislation was never gifted, never granted because people thought it was a good idea that they put that new regulation in place or put in that new rule or law. It was fought for by the trade union movement and implemented by Labour governments. And that struggle continues now. Not simply looking at new challenges in the workplace and the new responses we need to make to them. And the figures that Neil shared with you demonstrate the kind of shocking extent of the need to continue to work on health and safety. But we also need to simply maintain where we've got to, because workers' rights, the protections in the workplace are under risk, under threat at this moment, in a way that they haven't been for some time. Make no mistake that those on the Tory right who campaigned so hard for us to leave the European Union did it with one thing in mind, as Boris Johnson talked about, a bonfire of regulations. Well, a bonfire of regulations to the Tories is a bonfire of protections, it's a bonfire of workers' rights. And we're taking that struggle at the moment in Parliament as the government seek to transfer European law into British law for the day that we leave the European Union next March. And we're struggling not only to say that we want those rights frozen at the point that we leave the European Union, but that we keep up, because we know that the European social model will advance, that there will be additional rights. And the Tories are desperate not to keep up. They want a race to the bottom, and we're determined that they shouldn't have it. And they say, well, don't worry. Don't worry. We're transferring all these laws into British law so that on day one, everything will be the same. Well, we're not worried about day one. We're worried about day 2 and day 3, because they are determined to unpick the rights and protections that workers have built up across this country and across Europe when they have the opportunity to do that. We'll continue to work hand in hand with the trade union movement to ensure that doesn't happen, because it is, the slogan around this year's International Workers' Memorial Day is so important. Remember the dead, but fight for the living.
No worker should have to fear going to work and not making it home. No worker should have to fear that their work will make them ill and see their lives cut short because of it. It is important that we encourage all employers to protect their workforce or face the consequences and provide the correct protection against any risks they may face at work, no matter when these are identified. Unions make all the difference, and all employers should ensure their workforce is safe. The health and safety issues facing the workforce has changed over the years and will continue to change. And I know that unions will continue to fight for their protection of members as these new issues, such as mental health, as we've heard today from the GMB, and other issues come to the fore, and that we shall respond where possible to make sure that we are supporting the workforce to be protected at work. Thank you.
It is expected that in the UK at least 50,000 people die from injuries and illnesses related to their everyday job. That's at least 50,000 families missing more than just a breadwinner, missing their father, their son, mother or daughter. And countless communities bearing the knock-on effects, the grief, the mental health problems, the financial and social pressures. That is why we all have a responsibility to ensure that health and safety is seen as more than just a nice add-on to everyday business or a bureaucratic tick box. We must all take responsibility for ourselves and those around us, for making sure we look after one another and don't work in these risky businesses. This is even more achievable when we are organised in the workplace, when we join together in trade unions to campaign for safety working conditions. Unions have had a long, proud history of not only helping our members when tragedy and hardship strikes, but also using our collective voice to ensure that these awful accidents never happen in the first place.
Over the past year, we have seen some devastating effects from the fire at Grenfell. To all those involved, from the residents and the victims of the fire, to the police, ambulance and fire staff for their tireless work throughout all of the hours of the day, not having the rest so they could help those who needed it, and all those people who helped out in the aftermath, helping clothe the residents, providing shelter, giving the love, care and support for those suffering. All this adds up to show what incredible service we all individually provide. We should be proud of all our actions, but we need to fight for the changes to be made so this doesn't happen again. The changes in legislation to protect those who will be affected by events such as Grenfell, the pressure of fitting sprinklers into buildings, the correct standards being met, and the understanding of all the policies given, such as the Stay Put policy. As a union, we take the health and safety very seriously and appoint health and safety reps to help those in the workforce be safe. Look at new equipment and new uniform and personal protective equipment. We do this by working with the fire and rescue services to get the most that we can at ever-reducing budget we face today. On the 12th of August, we'll be holding a Memorial Day at Worley Hall in Sheffield, and I would like this opportunity to invite you all to the event. We'll be showing our centenary film about the Fire Brigades Union and its role in society over the last 100 years.
We'll have a union exhibition of important events such as the strikes, the struggles and the health and safety campaigns during the centenary. We'll be inviting the retired members, previous and serving union leaders to speak about their experience of being part of one of the few independent craft-based unions in existence. Remember the dead, fight for the living. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, we send our sincere thanks to Sheffield Trades Council for inviting us here to speak today. I grew up surrounded by miners, proud, diligent workers, but working in hazardous conditions, and the avoidance of disasters did not necessarily mean you did not suffer from illness at the end of that working life. It seems a world away when I think of people like my dad at a very young age, spent his first year of working life plunging into darkness to work and learn about collective working, having someone else's back and a sense of humour second to none. Sometimes I'm asked, why would anybody do that job? The dangers and conditions were awful. Of course they were, but through unionisation, conditions were challenged and improvements were made. You joined the NUM on your first day of work. It was a rite of passage. Our campaign attends this event every year. We lay a wreath, and in doing so we remember all those in the mining industry who went to work one day but did not come home. We remember all those who fought and argued for better safety conditions. We remember that strong unionised industry and the way solidarity and labour values helped to improve pay and conditions. But as we remember, we must never forget how a Tory government, cold, calculated and terrified that there is indeed power in a union, sought to destroy the mining industry. And in joining together today, we take inspiration from the grit, determination of those whole communities who stood strong and never gave up in that year's strike. We remember all of those who were at Orgreave on the 18th of June 1984. Many have now passed on without seeing the true narrative accepted by the government. But there are many still alive and determined that this wrong will be recognised. Not just that one day either, but the whole state-controlled response to what was simply an industrial action. We remember that across our whole mining communities, from Scotland down to Kent, and we particularly remember the occupation of our West and South Yorkshire mining villages, just as we remember all those who are not here today. The pits may have closed, but the comradeship will never die. And even now it continues to energise and galvanise us. We find ourselves in a world where threats to our working rights are as acute as ever. And in many ways, we can liken ourselves to those miners of the 84-85 strike. In doing so, we must remember, indeed, that the miners, united, will never be defeated. And the message to this government now is that we are all miners in spirit. Tory government, you may try and curtail trade unions with your pernicious legislation. You may try and scare workers against organisers. You may try and stop socialism and collectivism, but you forget one thing. We are the many and you are the few, and our message is getting through. You've heard from Neil yesterday in Westminster. We saw a private members' bill introduced to protect the rights of agency workers. We saw MPs back the Protectors Bill, standing up to protect our emergency workers. Both these bills were supported by my union, the GMB, and thanks to those trade unionist MPs for supporting and promoting. Yesterday, our trade union and labour movement did indeed fight for the living. The past history of what happened at Orgreave cannot be altered, but it needs properly accounted for and accurately recorded. Today is in part about fighting for the living. Many of those who were at Orgreave standing up just for the right to work are sadly no longer with us. Those who are and their families deserve nothing less than the truth and the justice for what happened at the hands of a police force directed by a government to try and destroy and smash its own people. We will be marking the 34th anniversary of that police rout at Orgreave on Saturday the 16th of June. 1 o'clock, meeting Orgreave Lane. Please come along, bring your banners, your support and your solidarity. Those who controlled what happened at Orgreave need to be accountable for it, and we all deserve a precise and correct recording of our social and political history. Thank you.
Where was it?